So it's a store in a box. We're going to be talking about 24-hour robotic automated storefront experiences, which I feel like is something we've touched on with a lot of the other panels, but haven't really dove into yet, gotten deep, gotten intense, and we're going to do that right now. So you guys have already heard from Cynthia Yeung, COO of CafeX, outside. Go try it. Get that hibiscus tea. It's delicious. And Mara Behrens, who's the VP of Design and Marketing for Chowbotics. You can also try a salad from Sally back there. So both of your robots can just be fully automated that don't necessarily need a human to help people interact. They can come up, they can order ahead on an app, at least for CafeX. They can watch their food be made or drink. They can get it, they can consume it, and they can rate it, and they don't need to interact with a human one bit throughout. So something that I'm curious about is, those are all the pros. It's fully automated, it can be operated at 24 hours a day, which is something that really makes all these automated tools special. And when you're creating that type of fully automated experience, I'm curious about the design and what sort of design factors you have to consider and think about to make it really user-friendly and not intimidating, and something that they can figure out even if there isn't a person there, say in a hospital at midnight, a nurse gets off her shift, wants a salad. What sort of design aspects do you consider when you're building out that sort of user interface?
So one of the aspects that is actually quite interesting about Sally is that it has a very small footprint. It's actually really easy. And if you see it from the outside, it looks like a very simple machine, but it's actually quite complex on the inside. It has tons of patterns, it has algorithms, it has things that the user doesn't necessarily have to know about it. But our goal is actually really to create a very easy user interface where they can customize any kind of meal that they want. They can provide any kind of feedback. And then we really are constantly really gathering insights on the way that they behave, on the consumer funnel. So we always are capturing all that data. But we, on the end, on the surface, you don't need anybody just interacting with the machine. It's actually quite simple to use. It's really friendly in terms of the look, and also on the touch, etc. So yeah, we're trying to make it as easy and as smooth as possible. And we're constantly gathering insights to see what the performance is, where people are actually dropping, where they're not clicking, etc. So we can actually make iterations and make it better.
So you can see if someone gets confused, leaves before they pay for their salad or something, and then trace the problem back to the origin and figure out how to fix it.
Yeah, we try to just always constantly track all the touch points where people actually, when are they leaving. So yeah, that for us is quite critical in order to make a better customer experience.
And for CafeX, I've used it once before, and I interacted with the person because I'm totally one of those people that's like, hey.
That's how we happen there.
From the South. So, but do people ever get confused with the person being there and saying oh, I thought I ordered online? Or how do you sort of streamline that process and make it clear that you can interact with people, but you don't have to?
Yeah, so I think this really just goes down to basic product design. Tracking each step of the user journey, trying to understand the fundamental pain point at that step, whether it's during the ordering process or the production process or the pickup process, and then it's just constant testing and validation, whether it's from the software and tracking side, tracking touch points on the screen, or maybe just again. One of the reasons why we have coffee bar specialists there is that they are our eyes and ears on the ground. They can observe their human beings. They know it's oh, this person didn't see this one thing. That's not necessarily something we'd be able to tell purely from the software data side, back-end side. And so again, having people on the ground really helps us iterate on that user experience. One of the things that we found very, very early on is that our first iteration, our very first machine that we had out at Metreon had a different user flow during the ordering process. And we realized that didn't work with international customers for a number of reasons. And so we have since changed that process with our new machines.
Can you talk about that at all? I'm curious how you changed it. Okay, that's fine. Just keep the curiosity. And something you mentioned, Mara, is customization. I know we've talked about that before today and in a panel prep call, but I'm really curious how far you either are taking or thinking about taking the customization aspect? I mean, yes, you can choose, tomatoes, no tomatoes. You can choose soy milk or regular milk. But are we thinking of adding, or have you already added some sort of like nutritional aspect, something where theoretically it could pair up with your 23andMe that tells you don't digest carbs well, so don't do that? Like, is that something you're exploring, or do you think that could get so granular it could just really interrupt the entire process?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we also look at. And then this is, again, really more from like a UX perspective. How much information is too much information? At what point are you sort of overloading people with tags or other information to the point where they are no longer able to make a decision because they're just paralyzed? And so that's, again, just something that we test. We'll test like different UI elements. We'll test colors, sizes, shapes, all sorts of different things. And we just sort of figure out what sort of has the most beneficial impact from a loyalty perspective, as well as from a revenue perspective. And there's always fallback mechanisms. So if people like really want this one thing and they're really the only one person out of 1,000 that ever asked for it, there's always some sort of fallback mechanism for that.
Yeah, in our case, one of the things that we notice, we have menus that are actually preset, but people really love customization. People really crave kind of just really having a last touch point, right? Kind of just they want to have this little thing that they love, or they want to tweak something in their recipe. So even though we do have kind of like menus preset and made by chefs and they're really delicious, the people in general really hit the customization button regardless. So it's quite interesting to see the behavior of the users. They feel very engaged and actually much more enticed to come back to a machine that actually really provides. It does have all the nutritional facts, so you can really have full transparency. And we would love kind of just to start having some partnership later, eventually, with different tools like Fitbit. I don't know exactly, so you can keep track of all the like everything that you're doing. So, but that's in the future. Mm-hmm.
And I haven't had the pleasure of a repeat visit to either of your robots yet, but I'm wondering, do they, or are you exploring down the road having them like remember you so they come back and be like, hello, Catherine, like last time you had a latte. Mm-hmm. Do you want a latte again? Is that something you think people might be creeped out by, or they would love it and be like, great, yes, they remember what I had. I want it again. Where are your thoughts on that?
So it probably depends on if you're ordering via the mobile app or the point of sale system. So if you're in the mobile app, we do have a mechanism for that. I think one of the things that's really interesting in the hospitality space specifically, actually, is that two startups ago, I was doing another hospitality startup, more in the hotel space, and one of the things that we learned there was that GMs, human GMs, are actually trained in very specific circumstances to not recognize returning customers for a variety of reasons. And you actually see that even in the restaurant space, like high-end restaurants or restaurants where they sort of see a lot of repeat traffic. They are actually trained to not recognize people sometimes, and I think that's a sort of a level of human tact and sensitivity that robots don't quite understand. And I think in Europe there's this whole movement around the right to be forgotten and things like that. So I think there is a question as to how much people want to be remembered and how much it would creep them out. And we're kind of straddling the line there.
Yeah. In our case, one of the things that we're actually noticing is, for example, in offices, people tend to really want to have something new constantly. So the menu changes drastically, like pretty much 360. So we really, we don't have that repeat experience constantly because they have always something fresh, always something new. The chefs are constantly providing new offerings. And in the other use cases, such as airports, etc., so it's actually new people constantly. So we haven't really had that need yet. So most of the customers, again, like even though they come repeat, they have different offerings and they have something new. They try, sometimes they have the same, but sometimes they have something new. Yes.
Maybe down the road when there's a Sally in, every airport, hospital, exactly. School, once you have world domination fully achieved. Mara, so this question's for you. Cynthia's talked a lot about how there is this need for more emotional labor, I think is how you put it, which I really liked. Having a person there and having a machine, a robot that you can sort of feel that you have this human-ish interaction with, sort of feel warmth and want to return. Is that something that you guys focus on a lot at Chowbotics? Or really, I'm curious, like as a design person there, how do you bring that sort of empathy and emotional intelligence to Sally, to a salad-making robot?
So our goal is actually to create a very warm experience throughout, like every time you touch the button, it really explains how it works, and we make it easy, like really not any kind of frightening experience at all. So we want to bring that human aspect through all that, all that flow, but also we bring all the chefs' pictures, all the people who is behind Sally. So even though Sally doesn't have a person right next to it and actually really touching the screen or anything for you, yet it has people behind Sally. So it really requires, some effort and some people really thinking about the menu that's actually, so we do have the face of those people behind, we bring that aspect of that human aspect through the marketing materials that we create and all kind of just throughout the whole user experience in general. We try to bring that for sure in one way or another, but we don't have a human next to Sally because that's part of what we believe is actually, like an asset. You don't need to have a person next to it. You do need the person behind it, but you don't need the person kind of just right in front of it. So yeah.
And even just the name Sally is such a, gives her friendly. Like a sort of personality.
It's a friendly name.
Yeah, Sally.
It actually came from salads, so that's actually
and it makes me think of salads.
Salads, but yeah.
Who's ever met a salad they didn't like? Not me.
Good.
Were you going to jump in there, Cynthia? Or no?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I think our sort of thesis is that true hospitality is meeting the customers where they're at. So again, 2 startups ago in the hotel space, one of the things that we found was that there was a demographic of users that liked keyless entry, like online check-in, keyless entry, walk straight to your room, don't talk to anyone. And there was a second segment of customers that actually wanted to go up to the front desk. They wanted to talk to someone. They wanted to have that conversation. I think we have that same thing, that sort of same philosophy at Cafe X, where if you don't want to talk to anyone before your morning cup of coffee, that's fine. You order online before you arrive, you walk in, you're in and out in 5 seconds, you punch your code. You don't have to talk to anybody if you don't want to. But again, we do have this demographic of users that likes to wait until they arrive to order, and then they start chatting up our coffee bar specialists. And we want to have that experience for them too. So I think it's really about meeting the customers where they're at and really understanding what is the actual underlying need that you're trying to solve for. So rather than be tech first and rather than be focused solely on like the robotics aspect, even though this is a robotics conference, really focusing on the user and what it is that they're actually trying to solve for.
Yeah, in our case, one thing as we're scaling, actually right now we have 50 machines all over, kind of like not all over the world yet, but hopefully very soon. So, but we do have different machines in different places. The locations are different, and the needs are different from each person, right? So there's use cases, for example, in offices where they have the staff right next to it. So they have an operator and a person who's completely kind of just really their cheerleader of Sally. So they're around. So it depends on the use cases. In our case, we actually sell the machine and they operate it separately. So we do have, different scenarios, I will say. But in any case, the whole user experience is really warm. We really are trying to bring that human aspect throughout.
Great, and I am going to open it up to questions in just a sec, so think about it, get them ready. We want that audience participation. You guys are smart, we're going to use you. But one last question from my side, something that we chatted a bit about when we were doing our pre-call is how automation can help bring transparency to the dining experience, which is something I'd never really thought about. I think of robots as sort of like unknowable, I don't really know what's going on, I'm no AI expert, I'm no tech whiz. And so how can something that's like, most people don't know anything about really bring this added transparency and knowledge to something as basic as dining? So I just wanted to hear your thoughts a little bit about how automation is helping increase transparency in dining.
Yeah, I mean, transparency is definitely one of our core values, and you can actually see that in the design machine. We're not hiding any of the mechanisms. It's all pretty obvious what exactly we're doing. We're also very transparent from a sourcing perspective, so you can see exactly who our vendors are, where we're sourcing from, where we're getting our beans from. And partly this might be because we're based in San Francisco, and so we understand that our customers really value that bit. I think that, with robotics, we're at this sort of inflection point in society where there's a lot of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt around the entire field as a whole. And so we want to be really sensitive to that and be really kind of upfront about what it is that we're trying to do and what it is that we're not trying to do. And I think there's also this sort of really fun, interesting educational component for the younger generation. I love it when they're, middle schoolers or high school students that come by because, you can sort of really show them, hey, robotics and AI, this isn't some mysterious thing. It's actually very, very accessible, and this is really something that you should be involved with.
Any thoughts? You don't have to have any.
No, yeah, actually, I mean, I don't know. I feel like in our case, in general, we have kind of like a whole user experience that is actually really easy to use. Everything is actually really simple. So we really kind of like are bringing all the nutritional facts within the flow. So once you actually are, every time you actually add an ingredient, every time you have something new, you can actually be watching what you're eating. So there's definitely full transparency in what you're consuming, which is quite critical for the eaters in general, for people, right? So nowadays, when they have kind of like a box salad or anything, they're always looking into the nutritional. So that's something important. In our case, a little different because we're not really all the products are, sourced by the people who actually purchase the machine. So it depends. There are some people who actually have locally, farm ingredients, and we try to bring that into, highlight that. But it depends on the person who actually is purchasing.
Great. I think we have time for one, maybe two questions. Who's got? Yes, Chris will approach you, sir.
Thank you. When taking an approach to launching a fully autonomous concept, what is your advice or what is your approach to customer support? I need a refund, I've spilled something. So not necessarily about the robot itself, but the full approach to servicing the customer after the sale.
Just to rephrase, the question is, what is your approach making a fully automated experience if a customer has a complaint or a critique or a question? How do you handle that response?
Well, again, in our case, we have a telephone number right next to the machine. So it actually has, so the people who you can approach. So you can immediately make a phone call in case you have any questions or any concerns. We also are kind of just really trying to do through the flow, understand a little bit better of where the problem is actually happening. So we can immediately make a decision, right? So for example, if a person says, hey, after they finish their whole flow, we have happy face or not happy face, and we're kind of just developing something where we can get more insights. So if a person has an unhappy face, we can actually understand what the issues are. So we immediately trigger responses to the people operating the machine so they can actually act on it immediately. If it's something related to the machine, we immediately also take the phone and we call right away. So we're really responsive, very, very responsive. So yeah.
Depending on what contact information you provide us, we have various feedback mechanisms. Again, we also just have a person there. And I think that, at least in San Francisco, people are very, very comfortable complaining to whoever is present.
That does help. All right, we got time for a final question. Who's got a good, juicy one out there? Nobody? This is shocking to me.
We don't bite.
Yeah, they're very nice, actually. Okay, well, fine. I will ask one then. This is kind of an easier question, but it is something that I wonder, especially for, as you say, I think people in San Francisco are maybe more comfortable complaining, also just more comfortable with robots in general. Like that is something that a lot of people are in that field or just really more knowledge about it than maybe the average Joe. So do you find or foresee, if you guys branch out into more rural areas or whatever, do you foresee the need for more hand-holding, or will Cafe X always have a person there? Is that sort of built into your business model, or will Sally have some sort of more explanatory device? Is that just something you guys are thinking about as you go to areas where people are less and less familiar with automated retail experiences?
Yeah, in our case, we do have some, we're developing actually some different tools to actually provide some more information, because there are some fears, right? Users are sometimes afraid to actually reach out to a machine and they don't know exactly how it works. They don't know where the food is coming from. So we're providing, again, going back to the transparency question, as much information as possible so they can really understand really how it works, how easy it is, and to make it as friendly as possible. So yeah, that's definitely something that we're looking into adding little by little to make the experience, the full experience, a little easier for the consumer, and to make it less, to mitigate the fear.
It can be intimidating if people don't know.
I mean, again, there's just different demographics of users, right? So there's definitely a particular generation that, takes to our technology like fish to water. They get it, they'll wave our person away if they try to help them. But there is a second demographic of users that honestly isn't even comfortable with touch screens. We literally have customers who are, American, so they're not foreign, there's no language barrier. They will stand in front of our screen and just stare at it. Like they won't even touch it, which I find, again, fascinating.
That's my mom. How do you know?
No, like literally they will just stand there and just stare, and then your coffee butcher's like, hey, can I help you? Show it. And so again, we're testing sort of different flows to see if there are ways to kind of automate that kind of onboarding and educational experience. I think it's also just a generational change, over time, as more and more other types of companies like, Itza or like, McDonald's start to kind of roll out this sort of automated or sort of self-serve ordering type systems. They'll become more common and people will become more comfortable with them.
Thanks, guys. I think that's all our time, and we're on to a break.